afternoon to all of you. I really hope you have enjoyed your lunch and all the lively discussions that took place during it and enjoyed the local tasty food that was offered. And I think we have really put together a really inspiring session for the smart city topic and domain. And I'm myself is Hanneli Hygarts, and I work at Forum Helsinki as a development manager in the smart city project area. And I have a strong focus on boosting open data use through projects like City SDK and API promotion in general, as well as developer engagement. And I think if I look back at this week, we've set and saw and witnessed many sessions where cities are very well marketing themselves, differentiating from themselves, and showcasing like the hottest solutions they have developed for themselves. But I think this afternoon we will be hearing something else. We will get a glimpse of the collaboration between and more like collaborative smart cities, cities that concretely have shared not only knowledge and methodologies, but also resources, whether it's digital services or code or standards. And we will be diving into the inspirational work that cities like Philadelphia, Amsterdam, Helsinki, and Ghent are doing, as well as networks like Eurocities network, as well as the Connected Smart Cities network, are doing on creating a real ecosystem around open data. How they are building a bigger market for applications and services, which methods they have used for joining forces to reuse digital services, and collaborating actually on the code level. And we learn about creating policies and networks that promote not only bringing efficiency to the public sector, but also at the same time providing very usable, meaningful services for their citizens, as well as allowing the developers and businesses to really build on this data, the oil that cities are producing on a daily basis. And personally, I'm really happy to see this shift, as we in Forum Helsinki have built on this principle already from the very beginning. And in 2005, we were actually initiated by companies so that they could speed up the development of digital services, as well as use cooperation and open innovation. And of course, these companies were at that time also competitors, but they still felt that there's an important value in sharing solutions and finding best practices. And currently, being owned by the City of Helsinki, we have really stayed loyal to this vision. And not only we develop digital services together with the city and the citizens and companies, but we also have a lot of international collaboration with partners like Barcelona, Amsterdam, and so forth for many years now. And we will maybe soon hear in Jaakko's presentation a bit more on that how we have this year also extended this new collaboration, a collaborative model to cover also Finland. So I think sometimes the more difficult one is to collaborate with the cities that are closest to you. And we will have six largest cities in Finland collaborating on things like open data. And as we see in today's session, we are not alone with this kind of thoughts, that we really believe that these cities collaborating on concrete things like networks, standards, scaling and reusing of digital services are all like key efforts to make these collaborations meaningful and concrete. But that's enough about the kind of the introduction. Let's put the cities now to the spotlight, and I would now like to warmly welcome Mr. Jaakko Salavuo, the Director of Information Technology and Communications from City of Helsinki, to share his thoughts on importance of collaborative efforts.
Thank you. Let me see if I can work this. Okay, so I'd like to share a few examples on how Helsinki is collaborating with other cities and how we actually see the benefits on the collaboration. Let's see. Slide set working?
Is there a clicker?
Oh, there's a clicker here. Oh.
he has that.
Junior, copias al CIR.
Can do it without slides.
I can, yeah.
Una presentació de la
I have some nice slides, so I want to
I
show
wanna
them as
show
well
them.
if it's possible. So this is Helsinki in November.
Està posat, eh? Està connectat, eh?
Here we go. Okay, so let's go. For us, it all starts with the citizens. So we really think that with transparency, with open data and right tools, we are able to take the whole community to develop services together with us. But many times the systems and the cities don't actually fit. So that's why we really think that open data, harmonization, and creating common tools is a very good way to create better services for the citizens. Opening data, harmonizing APIs, and creating common tools. I could talk about 3 dimensions of city collaboration that are relevant for Helsinki. First of all, regional collaboration. We have something called Helsinki Region InfoShare. So a few years ago, the city of Helsinki set a target to open all its documents and other data in a format that is easily accessible to developers, to citizens, and to anyone to utilize. The Helsinki Region InfoShare is a collaboration between the cities in the capital region, and we now have about a little bit more than 1,000 open data sets available. It's been implemented from simple visualizations of urban data to smart services and applications like this Open Ahjo called application, which is basically all the decisions made by the city authority right as they are actually being decided. So if anyone wants to see, I have this application on my smartphone here. It's a really good and useful solution for both citizens, journalists, and city officials as well. Other realizations are accessibility data, an application called Blind Square, which is basically in use in more than 20 countries. Another one very important for us in Finland is the whereabouts of snowplows. When does the snowplow hit my street so I can get to work? So these sorts of realizations we have. But if we move to international collaboration, it's the city SDK is an obviously very, very good example. A few years ago, the 8 cities started working together on opening data or creating some reusable interfaces and processes. And those cities were Helsinki, Manchester, Amsterdam, Barcelona, Lisbon, Rome, Lamia in Greece, and Istanbul. So city SDKs, basically by harmonizing APIs across cities. It's very much what Amazon and Google are doing for the technology their own developer base. It's just for cities. So this is what is very, very exciting about it. There are, of course, always some common areas that concern all the cities. And City SDK chose areas like smart participation, smart mobility, and smart tourism. Some examples here. Fix the City is based on Open 311, the standard developed in the US for location-based issue tracking. In 2013, in Helsinki, we opened our own issue reporting API, and were soon followed by Amsterdam and Barcelona. Fix the City, as you see here, it's an application where anyone can report things that need fixing across the city. Another one is then for the mobility. Helsinki Regional Transport Authority opens its interface to route and timetable information, and now we have a lot of implementations on the smart mobility across these cities. HSL Navigator is basically like a car navigator, but for public transport. It's in use apart from Helsinki, in Manchester, in Amsterdam, and the city of Tampere in Finland at least. And then tourism, Lisbon opened its tourism API, and then Helsinki followed with an application, and it was like this for Amsterdam and Lisbon as well. So as you can see, exactly the same experience across the cities. As Hanna mentioned, we've already also started collaboration between the Finnish cities. So 6 largest cities are working based on the learnings on City SDK and the Helsinki Region InfoShare. We're working on areas like open innovation platforms, open data and interfaces, and open participation. So the way I see the benefits of city collaboration, so especially for the developers. So if you work on an application for one city, you might get potentially 1,000 interested people to get your application. With these 8 cities and more, your potential market is millions of customers. So that's definitely a big benefit. For citizens, by reusing the applications and the standards, reusing the standards by creating applications, you get tested and seamless experiences across the cities, as you could see, for instance, with the Spot in tourism application. And for the city government, of course, reusing means cost reduction. And of course, one thing that's really quite important here is to use the wisdom of the crowds. We don't, of course, have all the wisdom in the city government, and the crowd, the citizens and the developers and the civic community as a whole is then able to create these good services together with us. And I think the more cities we have, join these sorts of concepts, the bigger impact we will have with the city collaboration. Thank you very much and welcome to Helsinki.
Thank you. Thank you, Jaakko. Next up, our dear collaborator, City Amsterdam, and Herr Baron, the CTO. Are you working first CTO of Amsterdam, right?
Absolutely, yeah, thank you.
Good to hear your experiences.
Yeah, and then there's a computer, that's always the... And should I just try to press the button or does it work? Kill. Oh yeah, and then I do the... I could have thought that, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to share a few of the things we do, because obviously, as you can see at this event, which is growing every year, everybody talks about collaboration, but especially for cities, it's quite complicated to find right ways to collaborate actually, because traditionally we've been organizing city networks with the international affairs departments. I'm not trying to insult everybody who's working for an international affairs department now, but it's and that are based on collaboration. But collaboration, just to collaborate, is basically never a good way to collaborate. And this is the way we have organized ourselves for the last years, quite intensively actually. And I think recently, within the last 5-6 years, with collaborations via the European Network of Living Labs, via the Connected Smart Cities Network, maybe Eurocities, City Protocol, or the ways we can find collaborations that are based on doing stuff together. And then you see that it's not about the International Affairs Department anymore, they're important as well, but it's especially about the departments who really need to do stuff, who start to collaborate and don't see collaboration as something extra, but something that's part of your daily business, basically. So actually cities, and I had a meeting with the CTO of New York this morning, and I stole this from her actually, and she said, and she's totally right, cities should collaborate more like tech companies collaborate together. So basically we should create GitHubs for cities when you think about it. And I think a few things of the things we've been discussing today are based on these types of collaborations and not on traditional city developments. And collaboration is something that has always been something we've been doing, at least in Amsterdam, because we needed to. We are a small and very insignificant country, as the most of you know. So we always needed to collaborate with other parties in the world to gain impact. We also needed to collaborate to make sure the water wasn't flooding our cities. We also needed to collaborate to get sickness and illness outside of the city. We also needed to collaborate with German, Spanish, French, whatever, differs a bit per period, to make sure we had economic impact, but also with people from Japan, 200 years monopoly, etc. So we always needed to collaborate, and it's because we're, well, a harbor for everything, basically. We used to be a ship harbor, airport, and nowadays we are an internet harbor, basically. Largest internet exchange of the world is based in Amsterdam, all based on collaboration, connecting lines, coming together, basically. So collaboration is key for us in everything we've been doing. And nowadays this connectivity part is pretty relevant, and the technology part is pretty relevant. And I want to show this picture for a second, and then I will come to more practical examples. But all these networks nowadays are about technology and IT, Smart City Expo. And more we realize, obviously it's about people. And when you look at this pyramid, which is Maslow's pyramid, as most of you probably know, it's not technology because of the technology. It's because technology is relevant on all levels of Maslow's pyramid. We use technology to grow food, for healthcare, and actually most of you who stay in Barcelona who don't live here probably were texting with the people you love. And when you don't, you get an argument probably. So technology is getting into our daily life on all these levels basically, to learn, for our food, etc. So for cities, it becomes very important to organize this IT part of the city, because we don't know anything about it. We don't create standards as a city. We've never been into technology. Actually, before we write a policy document, it takes us 2 to 5 years normally. A new release at Amazon.com, as mentioned before, it takes 2 days. So I took our urban planners not too long ago to Booking.com, which is a company which is 200 meters from City Hall in Amsterdam, and showed them how they develop new products and services. And they have 100 teams working together in a very agile process, doing sprints of 2 days. And then they deliver 100 new products. Our policy department delivers one piece of policy every half year. So the speed we work is totally different, and we need to change that basically. And so in the layer of the city where technology comes in, we need to learn to work more agile, and we need to work in a global collaborative way, like we did to fight the water. So when you think about a city as a platform, think of Google, Amazon, Apple, whatever, Microsoft, all platforms now. A city, the same thing. So applications being put on top of that, like the former speaker said, shouldn't be about just for our city. They should fit on a platform that's in other cities as well. So that's the reason why we're over here today. We're developing the APIs. We're developing ways to work to grow these applications to something that fit in not only into the Amsterdam or Helsinki, London or Barcelona app store, but fit in every app store. So when you want to do something for mobility or healthcare, it shouldn't only work in Amsterdam, because you want to click into the next city as well. So a few examples, which we've done together basically via the European Network of Living Labs and other partners involved in that network. The Commons from Europe program, which was very successful actually, especially it was about stealing. See if we could challenge commons to work with us, developers, to come inside of the city, which is quite scary. And for them actually, because they're getting filthy coffee and they're in meeting rooms that are very boring. But also quite scary for civil servants who need to work with people who are not thinking of protocols and loops of 6 months, but they were thinking more about, hey, can we make a prototype in 2 weeks? Which was fairly new for people in City Hall. We remember from us, when we ask a civil servant, what's your work? It's about sitting behind a computer I'm a civil servant, so I'm allowed to make jokes about it, but it's sitting behind a computer and write a policy document. That's hard work. When you go to a school or a healthcare institute, you go out and you take some time on your agenda and you plan it and then you go there, but it's not really work. Work is sitting behind your computer and writing policy. So what this Commons learned us is that it doesn't work that way. You should go out, talk to people, and think about solutions, and think of a solution. The difference between thinking as an engineer and thinking as a lawmaker, basically, I would say. So they went out, talked to people, and came up with, well, actually very nice apps, basically, based on tourism and to make sure people were going outside of the city center also to other areas. And this whole program has led, including other examples, to a civic exchange that's being started by cities, because actually the most things we've been developing actually were developed already, so we could have stolen them somewhere else when you think about it, stolen in a nice way. But also are things we can share as well in a way other cities could start to use it. So it sounds very simple, but this is not something we've been doing with thank you. So development start to share basically this data. Another example is the Open Cities program we've basically done in the same consortia, which was based on, hey, how can we think about developing platforms for crowdsourcing? How can we develop platforms for open data? How can we really start to use open data? How can we stop thinking about, hey, this is the data we have, let's put it online, which is interesting. Even more interesting is, hey, this data is needed, let's see if we can get the data people really want. So the whole Open Cities program was about this way of thinking, which is a question that's relevant for all of the cities, I would say. There's not a single city in the world that doesn't have an open data program at the moment, but I think 95% of them works, hey, this is the data we have, put it online, have fun with it. Well, you want to think, hey, what's the data that's needed, basically? So we started an open data portal, and last example I wanted to mention is a city SDK, which is based on the former picture I've shown, which is actually about how can we create this platform not only, but also create APIs that are similar in the same place and create a standard. And hey, cities don't create standards. Did I mention it before? Yeah. Cities don't create standards. So industry is adopting this, and they are using this open standards basically for cities, because we're never going to implement a proprietary software in our city. Not going to happen. So for every vendor who wants to sell proprietary software for a city, not going to work. Because we want to show what goes in and what goes out for democratic reasons, for principal reasons. So City SDK is a great example about creating the interface between the city and the people who create apps. So there are lots of examples that came out, organizing the ecosystem. Museums joined in City SDK. Museums are an application on the city, actually. We used open data. Well, snow in Helsinki, we also have snow. And we also discovered that our routes we are salting or sometimes twice the same route, and other routes we don't do at all. Organize app competitions, also in an international level, so also this apps for Amsterdam, but there's also apps for Europe. So why not find apps that are replicable to other cities? And this is more or less the way it works. So I want to wrap up. I mean, I like this picture. I mean, in all the things we do, you should realize that it works like this. I mean, collaboration is not about, it's also about defining roadmaps. I hate roadmaps because the thing with roadmaps is that you start a steering committee to make changes to the roadmap on a monthly basis most of the time. So it's more about what's a common goal, where do you want to go to, put that on the horizon, and get this collaboration into your daily mode of doing stuff and not seeing it as something extra. And that means sometimes you go down, sometimes you go up, but trust and reality probably will help you a bit further. So the role of the government is changing, and this is the thing we need to collaborate on. We need to define inclusivity, privacy, how to cope with the market, what security, what safety, what resilience. These are the topics. As cities, we need to find the answers to, because privacy is not the same thing as 2,000 years ago. Security used, I mean, our mayor and our police force, up to 20 years ago, when you committed a crime, you really should be there, actually. You should, where you committed the crime, whatever, steal something, etc. Nowadays, you're a bit an idiot when you're really there when you commit a crime, because you want to do it on a distance and etc. So things are changing, and we need to find the new dialects of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very inspiring examples. I hope many of you catch on those websites and start using the things that are already out there. Next up, we get a point of view across the ocean from Philadelphia, one of the leading cities on open data, and I think also collaboration, eager to collaborate with other cities as well. And we have Tim Wisniewski, the Chief Data Officer from Philadelphia. So please.
Thank you.
Hi guys, I'm Tim Wisniewski. I'm the Chief Data Officer for the City of Philadelphia. I'm new to my role, but previously I was the Director of Civic Technology, so I worked on some similar projects. I'd like to talk today about cities collaborating on open data, open source, and open networks. And particularly what I feel like, especially when I hear stories like this, we're building the foundations for that collaboration. So that's what I'm going to talk a bit about today. So first of all, open data. We've seen laws and executive orders and policies and initiatives popping up in cities and states across the US for the last 10 years. Where they originate is particularly interesting. Usually they come from within the city administration itself. You know, the mayor signs an executive order, it leads to the creation of an open data portal, like in Chicago in 2010. Sometimes you'll see regional or intergovernmental portals and initiatives pop up. We have a lot of smaller municipalities in certain states. So rather than each municipality creating their own open data portal, sometimes you'll see cities like Pittsburgh serving as the anchor city. They're undergoing this right now and creating a regional data portal for the neighboring municipalities. And then finally, what I think is most interesting is when these initiatives come from outside the administration, whether it's because the controller creates an open data portal and that puts pressure on the administration to do the same thing, or in Philly's case, the community created the portal. The city didn't actually build it. It was created by a partnership between the private sector and the nonprofit groups and a few folks from government, but it was this collaborative group that actually built the portal. And you know, since then, Mayor Nutter signed an executive order and we've published over 150 data sets to the portal, but we still feel as though we're contributing to the community's data portal. There's stuff on there from the Transit Authority, from universities, from nonprofits, and we're really contributing to that. So while the ways that the portals and the initiatives originate may differ from the different cities, the one thing that really unites them, in my opinion, are the networks and the communities around the data portal. So when cities like Chicago and Boston and Philly publish open data, you have organizations like Code for Philly, Code for Boston, and Code for Chicago. These groups that have largely been cultivated by Code for America and are commonly known as brigades, who actually use the data and create compelling use cases, who build apps and ways to connect to citizens through the data. What I think is particularly interesting about that is that I can use any of those examples from those other cities back here at Philly. So for instance, I was just talking about the Chicago Health Atlas to our health commissioner in Philadelphia as an example of why it's important to release health data in an open format instead of just PDFs on the website. Another example is the California State Budget Challenge, where citizens can go in and participate and actually try to balance the budget and be involved in governance. I think it's a great example of why publishing data can lead to civic engagement, and I use it all the time. Neither of those examples were built in Philadelphia or had Philadelphia in mind, but it's okay. We can still use them. We're also contributing to that pool of examples, Code for Philly in particular. So these are a few examples. I don't have time to go into too much detail on them, but they were created by our civic hacking community. One of my personal favorites is at the top left there, phlcrimemapper.com, where you can draw a lasso around your neighborhood, see all the recent crimes there on your mobile phone. It's pretty neat. We also have a transit one and our school district budget. These are all open source. We didn't ask anybody to build these, but other cities can then use these in making the case to their department heads and that sort of thing. Code for America has even built the Civic Commons, where a lot of these applications are housed, and you can view that stuff. But moving on, open source. Open source, I think, is a great example of reuse, just in general. We're trying to embrace open source at Philadelphia. We're reusing languages, libraries, frameworks, applications. Frankly, there's selfish motivations there. It allows us to build cheaper and quicker. To give you an example, these are some of the applications we've built in-house using open source software. The one on the left there, our Election Day mobile app, we were able to build that in a weekend. Now, to be fair, that was largely due to poor planning on my part, but we were able to get it done because we used jQuery Mobile, a JavaScript library. So this stuff helps us build more quickly, and following the mobile thread, it helps us reach a wider audience. So for those neighborhoods in Philadelphia that don't have internet access in every home or a computer in every home, so many people have smartphones these days. We can reach more of those people through these open source frameworks by creating apps like My Philly Rising, which is a neighborhood-focused app for building communities, and zoning appeals, which you can use at your civic association meeting. And finally, I just want to say we're giving back. This often falls, it's the responsibility of the larger cities. And we are the 5th largest city in the US, so we're giving back. These applications that we're building, we're putting it on GitHub. It's the industry standard for software sharing. We're the largest government user of GitHub with over 50 public repositories, including tools that other governments can use to open their data using systems that they may already have, like Esri products, as well as like our biggest applications on there. What I think is particularly interesting is the relationships that we have with vendors. We're paying them to build software for us. A lot of times we're actually requiring them to put their source code up on GitHub as well. So My Philly Rising was the example I mentioned before. You can find that source code on GitHub and bring it to your city for free. You can benefit from the money we paid the vendor and the time we spent with them because we asked them to put their source code up there. There's also an API management console. You can find Text-as-in, which was a Code for America project that started in Philly for texting and civic engagement through SMS, as well as Change by Us, which Amsterdam has picked up. That also started in Philly, and the source code is up on GitHub. So I don't have time to go too much into it, but I will say that it was difficult initially to introduce open source, but I do believe that we have embraced it. Again, I can talk more about that in the panel discussion later, but I believe that the strongest testament, in my opinion, to Philadelphia embracing open source is, you remember that PHL crime mapper application I mentioned before? If you go to the Philadelphia Police Department website and you click on Maps, it's now the official map of the Philadelphia Police Department website. Built by a civic hacker, they forked the repo in GitHub terms, and it's now the official map. So I'm really proud of that example. So that's open data and open source. I just want to move on to innovation networks pretty quickly. Basically, how do we share this information with our colleagues? How do we communicate this sort of thing? I mentioned Civic Commons before. That's a great example. Code for America has really been spearheading a lot of this stuff in the States. They have created the peer network, which is a great way to communicate with my colleagues and folks in similar positions in other cities, as well as the Municipal Innovators mailing list. Socrata has created a monthly conference call for chief data officers. My boss, Adele Abeid, the chief innovation officer at Philadelphia, was involved in building something called the G8, which was the CIOs of the 8 largest cities in the US. Unfortunately, he's the only lasting member. Folks move on, they retire, they get promoted. But the good news is he's actually got the interest of the 20 largest cities in the US and will now be forming the G20 in January. So I'm really excited about that. They get to talk about things like cloud and open source and open data on a regular basis. But there's one other thing that we're doing in Philadelphia that relates to innovation networks. We're talking a lot today about sharing solutions and ideas between cities and between countries. Those of you who also work in government will know that sometimes we need help doing that between departments within the same government. You know, we can hire a bunch of people from the outside and get things off the ground and really shake things up. But as we saw with the G8, people leave, people get promoted, people move on. So how do we create innovation that lasts and is not dependent on one particular compartment of government or anyone's individual tenure? And how do we create a network within government where departments are collaborating? We've created an Academy of Municipal Innovation. We partnered with the Philadelphia University, who has an undergraduate degree in innovation, to create a certificate of municipal innovation. So far, we've sent 19 city employees from various departments in the city to this 8-week program to take classes. They get their certificate, and they come back basically deputized as innovators. They have a network of folks in other departments who they may never have interacted with otherwise, who get innovation, and they know they can bounce ideas off of. Going a step further, we've created a physical space for these innovators called the Innovation Lab. It's a co-working space for city employees, just like the ones you see in the private sector. As you can see, it doesn't feel like government. We've got couches, we've got a coffee bar, we've got huge TVs, we've got whiteboards on wheels. It's crazy. It's a great space where these folks, not only from the academy, but other city employees can come and work on innovative things. The whole idea is that, think outside the box when you're in this room. work with folks from other departments. And finally, I just want to say we also have created an innovation fund to really put our money where our mouth is. We've got $100,000 set aside from the proceeds of the Philadelphia Marathon to test the ideas that come out of the academy and come out of the lab, test the sharing of ideas between departments. We're trying to build this foundation within city government. Hopefully we can expand that to between cities and countries as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I think there were many inspiring examples for us to copy to Europe as well. Next up, we have the city of Ghent from Belgium, represented by Bart Rosseau, who is also the co-chairing the Open Data Working Group in the Eurocities network. And we will be hearing examples from both from locally from Ghent and also how the Eurocities network can boost sharing of solutions.
Okay, this is working. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the invitation. I would like to talk about intercity cooperation, but also beyond the projects, because we heard a lot of examples of cooperation between cities which were funded by the EU or other sources. But I'm going to talk in a dual capacity, but in fact in a triple capacity. I'm going to talk as an employee for the city of Ghent. I'm going to talk as the chair of the Open Data Working Group. But something we often forget is that we're also all citizens. So I'm also going to talk as a citizen of maybe sometimes a smart city. Let's talk about Eurocities first. As Dave mentioned earlier, it started as Telecities, but then it became Eurocities, the Knowledge Society Forum, which is a membership organization from 135 cities are part of in 35 countries. So here's the map. So it's spread all over Europe. This is quite important that it's not localized. So we have a lot of different cultures, a lot of different legislative frameworks, a lot of different people getting together from time to time to exchange experiences, formulate ideas, formulate or clarify problems and possible solutions. There are different fora in Eurocities. We have a culture forum, a social forum, economical forum, but we're part of the Knowledge Society Forum. And there we try to see and talk about what's the impact of IT and other technologies on the cities today. And I'm happy to be chair of the Open Data Working Group. We want to be more than just a meeting every 3 months where people get their airfare paid for so they can be in another city. No, we try to actually produce results. And one of the first things we did, and that was the final project of our colleague from Berlin, who's retired now. We amassed all the experiences of all the cities who were pioneering open data, and we put out an open data guide. I know there's a guide by the Open Knowledge Foundation. I know there's Socrata has some good documents. But what we did, how do we work with open data in cities, in city administrations? How do you convince other departments? How do you get political support? How do you reach out to the community, and so on and so on? What is the legislative framework? And it was quite interesting. The result is great, but also the effort, the talks we had, and the experiences we could share. That was great as well. So, and what we also did last year, because some people who were new members in the Knowledge Society Forum, they were asking, yeah, we're thinking about establishing an open data portal. What kind of portal are you using? Some people use Windows, some have an open source solution, and so on. So in half an hour time, using open source tools, we created an online survey, and we asked some questions. What kind of portal are you using? How much did you pay for it? So we created in half an hour a tool to benchmark the requirements for an open data portal. It's on Google Doc, so it's an open survey. You can see the results. It's quite interesting because then a lot of elements come to the surface. The plan for next year is to expand this so that we can drill down to the limitations of good portals or how the organizational culture of your administration influences those decisions. So what's the impact of the network, of the Eurocities network? We want to establish an active role for local governments in the open data world, because the first time I heard about open data, it was a lot from the reuser community, the developers. They want open data for transparency or innovation. There were a lot of companies interested, but not so much the governments themselves. They were looking at it. Some people, individuals, were very interested. It's going to be exciting. But so when I take the European perspective, and the EU was starting paying attention to the open data as one of the promises to kickstart a digital economy, because we saw what was happening in the United States. We saw what's happening elsewhere. And they saw open data is important. Luckily, through the work with the KSF, the Knowledge Society Forum, and Eurocities, we could talk to the decision makers on a European scale to say there's an active role for cities and city governments in this world. So that was really interesting. So that's the second bullet. But also, everybody's talking about sharing best practices. I would like to add what's more interesting is sharing your biggest failures. What didn't work? Everybody here has some projects that didn't work, and I think you learned more from that than from your successes, because sometimes successes happen by coincidence. But this platform allows to share those failures. But that's not easy, because you have to know each other, you have to trust each other, you have to feel that you're in a comfortable zone to do this. But this is working. So now I'm going to talk from the Ghent perspective. Why Ghent it's the best city to live in, according to me. But we're not that big a city. There's 250,000 people, so compared to the other cities represented here, that's small. But still, we're the second city in Belgium, the third if you count Brussels as one city, because in fact it's 19 communities. But let's not go into that because that's too complicated. Why is it important for us to participate in a network like this? It's to get inspired, to see what's possible elsewhere. Because more often than not, the kickstart to work with open data or smart city initiatives is pioneers within the administration or outside the administration. But if you see that other cities are working on the same field and they have working results, it's easier to go back to your administration, to your community, and convince people it can be done. The feasibility of open source solutions. It's really important because more often, sometimes it's hard to convince your IT department to step on board, because they have different questions on feasibility on the management side. Will it be sustainable? What if something goes wrong? Because they're also civil servants, they're not just IT guys. And one time I had a talk with some people from Paris, and we were going to talk about standards and code and so on and so on. No, what we did, we were talking, you know which problems I experienced? It was very hard for me to convince that person, but I did such and such and such. And they did it, and they were talking about the same thing. And when we left each other, they said it was good to share open data war stories. And I like this concept. It's this pioneering role, and you still have to convince people. My colleague says 50% of my job is seducing people. Seduce people to step on board. So I like that. But for me, personally, the most important part is that you have a network of experts all over Europe. So they're experts, they're on standby. I can take a phone or I can email, which is easier for me than talk to the phone. And what was the link again to that open source solution? There it is, thank you. As a city, as a government, we're not used to get free consultancy. But these networks help. And that's the same for the open source and open data community. They're also on standby, they're also eager to help. But what are the challenges and how does intercity cooperation work with that? Have you ever seen the movie Field of Dreams? It's a baseball movie. And one of the famous quotes is, if you build it, they will come. So one of the ambitions of open data, you have a portal and the developers will flock to your portal and they will make amazing apps. Yeah, everybody knows by now it's not that easy. And so you have to seduce people once more. But their competition works. So if we can say to the developers in Ghent, you know, in Amsterdam they did this, and then they can say, we can do this better. Okay, prove it. So that works. But also the promise, which has been said before, that your work can be known beyond your city limits. That's why it's important. And also, how can we stay relevant? How can we keep releasing important data, relevant data, but which relates to problems that people are facing today? Not yesterday's problems, but the problems of today. And then very short, we're also involved in a project, Citadel on the Move, where we try to combine all these aspirations. This is the portal, you can go, the link is also in the presentation. Here we created a tool, because when we talk about city collaboration on open data or solutions, we talk about standards. But where do you standardize? Do you standardize in the system, which you have paid dearly, more often than not, and you have to re-engineer your system to harmonize with the existing standards, or do you make an interface to work right now? So that's what we're trying to do here. The goals are harmonizing data and also make the data human readable, not just machine readable, because this is important to create solutions. And also citizen development and have open data for solutions. So for instance, almost everybody can use an Excel sheet. And this tool allows to make a web app based on an Excel sheet. So we have the sessions, apps for dummies, where we go to different neighborhoods. What's your problem? There's the neighborhood I'm living in. There's a lot of students living there and a lot of young parents. So now we have a babysit app based on the Citadel tool. It's not open data, but it's data being created by the community and which is also published as open data. So that's great. And the developers, we connect them as well with the citizens because the city can be an intermediary. And I believe that the city collaboration would also be great if we can connect citizens from Helsinki with developers from Ghent, Barcelona, or whatever. So we have these common issues. So data is often perceived as a problem because it can get quite complicated. But now, and I like this slide because cities were perceived as a problem in the 80s. Now they're part of the solution. And I believe that data is going along the same road. So here are some relevant links if you are interested. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bart. And next up we have Dave Carter, who is the Honorary Research Fellow in the Centre of Urban Policy Studies at Manchester, focusing on smart cities and digital inclusion. And you have a long history through the Manchester Digital Development Agency, working on open data and pushing open innovation to the city. So we're eager to hear from those experiences as well as from the ones that you've got through the Connected Smart Cities network.
Okay, thanks very much. For the last 30 years, I've been working for the City of Manchester. This summer, I decided to take early retirement and move to the university. So hopefully I can now say a few more things now I'm no longer a civil servant without fear that some of the politicians might decide to end my contract. But that's not what I'm here today. I'm here today really to talk about how collaboration is not only at the centre of making a smart city, both locally, because the collaboration that we want to develop is with citizens, with users of services, as well as the staff who are there paid to create services, because I just don't believe you can have a smart city without smart people, smart citizens. But also collaboration, as Bart and other colleagues have said, between cities, so that we can get around this problem that if you go to company X, they say, we can develop your smart city in a box, no problem, 10 million euros. City B comes along, 10 million euros. City C, 10 million euros. We're going, hang on, there's something wrong here. Okay, it might cost 10 million euros for the first one, but why not 5 million for the second, and then 2.5, and then 1, and maybe those companies have used some of our IP that we've never charged them for. So maybe it's a joint venture, and maybe the city needs to contract with other cities. So it's a very interesting area. And this idea of smart city agendas, which have come out particularly of the digital agenda for Europe, and also the idea that as well as transforming our services, we know how ICT has been able to make our cities more resilient, more sustainable. But what about IT itself? We were given a stark warning 3 years ago when our electricity company warned us that they would no longer be able to meet the demand for energy at our main science park, where some of the biggest internet infrastructure companies are. But what they said was, there's clearly a market demand. So if you pay us 5 million euros, we'll build extra capacity. And we're going, we didn't think that's how the market worked. We thought the market was about private investment, and you would then supply this service. And oh, no. And as one of our politicians said, the big problem with public-private partnerships, or PPPs, is normally the first P is for public investment, and the second and third Ps are for private profit. And that's not necessarily the way, when we have less and less money, that we want to see the priorities of public investment going. And so that's why some of the initiatives we've talked about in Eurocities are so important. And in fact, it's great to be back in Barcelona, because believe it or not, one of the first founding conferences of Telecities was here in 1994. And then we had a fantastic slogan. It was called Articulating the Urban Demand for Telematics. And everyone went, wow, we've got to do this. So 20 years later, we're kind of winning, but it's been a pretty hard struggle. And talking of hard struggles, the thing about this is there is not a consensus on this, nor should there be. There's a real debate going on about smart cities, about the smart cities in a box concept, which Anthony Townsend developed in his recent book. Just out of interest, how many people have read the science fiction writer's Bruce Sterling's latest pamphlet about the Internet of Things? 2, 3, 4, yeah. It's a diatribe. Most of you who are techies will hate it. But people like Bruce Sterling, if you like, are the poets of the current internet age. They're people not afraid to go and describe some of the really important policy or even political issues. And quite frankly, I would say if in the next few months you are serious about engaging in this debate and you haven't read Bruce Sterling's pamphlet, diatribe, then actually you're not serious about taking part in the debate. Because only if you counter and come up with compelling arguments within this debate do we move forward. Because otherwise it's just technological determinism, and that's not good for anyone. For us in a place like Manchester, which was very much the original modern world industrial city, it's been about really a change in mindset. Manchester was kind of written off in the 1980s as a place that was going to disappear into its own collapsing coal mines of crime and drugs. And 30 years later, and it has taken a long time, I remember talking to politicians in the late 80s, and they were saying, well, can you say it's going to be done in 4 or 5 years? Because anything more than that is a bit difficult. The media might pick up on it. I said, well, it's going to take at least 10. We say, well, can we say it's the first part of a programme that's going to last 4 or 5 years? Now, I reckon 30 years later, we're probably about 2/3 of the way through. But at the time, if I said, look, I'm sorry, politicians, it's a 50-year plan. let's just be honest with people. It's a 50-year plan, and we're at the first kind of bit of that that's going to take 4 or 5 years, and there's going to be a lot more to be done. And of course, I would have lost my job there and then. But we have to be realistic about some of these things. We've got to look for short-term wins, because if you don't, you'll lose people. You've got to engage people immediately, but you've also got to be honest about how long it's going to take. So for us, kind of riffing on Richard Florida's famous technology, talent and tolerance, we've kind of come up with innovation, creativity and diversity as what underpins a smart city based on smart people. And collaborative partnerships are not only important for cities, as my colleagues have pointed out, they're also important for the talent that's out there with developers, because it encourages developers not just to do things on a whim, but really take their entrepreneurial talent and their experience themselves as citizens, because although some people don't accept this, actually developers are citizens, honest. No matter what they say and what they look like, they are very important citizens, and we need to bring them in that way. And so the idea of cross-sector innovation, and we have a data synchronization program between the 10 municipalities in Greater Manchester, the 20 health organisations, the 30 different divisions of the police department, transportation, which is largely privatised, and bus companies say, sure, we'll put smart fares on our buses, but guess what? You've got to pay us £2 million because we're a private company and we can't afford it. So there's a lot of challenges to be overcome there. And this is just one more example. I'm glad you told me it was invented in Philly, because I assumed the New York people who first stole it from you had invented it. But it's just simply taking these open source platforms, which are very easy to do, and replicating them. So, what could be easier? Almost zero cost, building the confidence because you've got somebody to phone up and say, we didn't think the app would quite work like that. So that idea that there's a group of experts across these cities and in these networks to be on standby, to be a virtual help desk, is a really important aspect to this. So all these examples, and they're massive, they're not just about ICT. They're about energy and mobility and so much more. And so not only do we have the networks, but we're also networking the networks. And through the Connected Smart Cities Network, we bring together about 30 different projects, more than 50 cities, and more than a kind of 100 different app or service development projects. And the big new thing is about digital production. The relocalization of production through 3D printing, through rapid prototyping. And one of the challenges we're doing now, particularly in cities in the UK, is talking to our schools and saying, how many of your schools already have a maker lab, or have a 3D printing production plan, or have a training program for teachers in digital production? Because in 10 years' time, if just about every small business in the city has a 3D printing capacity, if many individuals who like to build things in a little building in their back garden, we call them sheds, have 3D printing, then there's going to be a whole new development of jobs in local neighbourhoods. And what are we doing in our schools to prepare for that now? And the answer is nothing, but it's beginning to happen. And that idea of thinking ahead is so important. I just want to finish on a particular project in Manchester, and it takes up what Tim was saying about how important the not-for-profit sector is. We have a small creative space set up by a bunch of geeks, self-called geeks, it's not a term of abuse, where they have taken an old building in our cultural quarter, they pay a peppercorn rent, they've done it up. It's called the Manchester Digital Lab, but they call themselves a digital youth club for adults. And it's got the nickname Mad Lab. But it's things through here where you have intergenerational connections, sometimes a focus on the most difficult to reach people. Yesterday, I had the privilege of going up to Cornellà here in Greater Barcelona to see the Senior Lab, which is part of City Lab, where they're working with people mainly over 60 getting them involved not only in things like building websites, coding, but also Arduino technology, identifying what to them as older people a smart city should mean. So there's a lot of opportunities for these autonomous spaces to be the zones of experimentation, engagement of citizens, and particularly young people. Last year, we were very proud as a city when 14-year-old Amy Mather won Digital Girl of the Year award from the European Commission. And I love this bit in the press release. Said she teaches older pupils how to code during her school lunch breaks and with the Manchester Girl Geeks. That's the future. That's where a lot of our investment should really be going. And I don't know if you know, in the UK, we're a huge fan of cooking shows. We have all these cooking challenges and bake-offs. So we came up with a little recipe that brings together. It's like, make sure you really engage those innovative independent organisations. And you have to maybe help them with some organising oil. Introduce them to some geeks, add a mix of social media, think about open access, open networks and open systems. And we also, particularly in Manchester, like our food a bit spicier, so maybe a bit of open source in that as well, and organise a digital bake-off or two. And we really do think, I was in Shanghai talking about this 2 weeks ago, and one of the leading Chinese e-health experts got up and said, look, I think we should focus on a more simple agenda. There should be just simply 3 targets for all public policy. And when you use a word like public policy in China, you mean state policy, you mean party policy. He said, number 1, subsistence. No one should starve, no one should go hungry. Number 2, health. That's really important. Number 3, happiness. And I thought, that'll do me. Let's keep it simple. Subsistence, health, happiness. That's the goal to achieve. So thanks very much. I hope that's given you an overview and look forward to some questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. So before opening the floor to the questions from the audience, I would like to ask, we found out through your presentations there's so many resources out there. So is it easier for cities to share than to actually copy and reuse? And why? And how can we solve that? Any takes on that? Do we need an award for the best copycat city or somehow?
Perhaps I'm not. Can you hear me? So if I'm understanding you correctly, are you asking if there's so many resources out there, why aren't more cities using them?
Exactly.
Okay. So when I mentioned at the beginning about building the foundation, I think there's a lot of applications out there that we cannot just start using. For instance, we may not have the data available yet, or it may not be in the right format, or there may be really boring, really technical problems with getting the data that we haven't tackled yet. I mean, those are the immediate things that comes to mind. I'm sure there's a deeper answer to your question that Gero will answer.
Not sure if it's deeper actually, so you're raising the bar, but no. I mean, you're right. I mean, there's so much to share, but I think historically and traditionally, cities have the standard answer, yeah, but it's different in our city, which is true when it's about traffic or urban planning or etc. And the standards you use and the type of data. I was in Beijing 2 weeks ago, and they had this list with most congested cities in terms of traffic. And number 1 was London, and number 2 was Amsterdam, and number 3 was Shanghai. And I thought this is a bit silly because, I mean, everybody who's been to Amsterdam knows that we are not very much congested, unless you think about bikes. And what they've done, they were thinking about travel time from home to work, basically, which is fairly long because we're on a bike and a bike goes slow. So they got that as congestion because they misinterpreted the data, basically. So there's loads of localization needed in the way we think. And cities still think that's hard to do, but they don't realize that technology, working agile, etc., is not in their veins. So we still think it's different in Amsterdam than it's in Philly or it's in Helsinki or in Ghent or in Manchester, which is all true, but it's a bit more different than it used to be. But this is not in the veins we organize it. So I'm not sure if we need our own award, because one of the things we decided 2 months ago is that we quit joining awards for a while because we can compete on a monthly basis with an award somewhere.
I also believe that there's a lot of things we can reuse or copy, but what we tend to forget sometimes that we need some time in the process, that you get everybody on board, that everybody agrees on what the problem is. So you have to formulate the right question before you can say there's a lot of answers out there, because you need this process. So it's a matter of ownership. And sometimes we forget this in the process. There's a lot of digital tools, but you need to frame the right question first. And sometimes that's harder.
Maybe one quick addition. And also, I started my presentation with that. Most of our traditional city collaborations were a collaboration because of the collaboration, basically, with a political MOU and say, hey, we're going to need to collaborate. And so you also need to have the right people into this international collaboration and connect them. And this is also a challenge for cities, I would say.
Yeah. And are there questions from the audience? Yes, please. Is there a microphone? Or I can't see anything. Yeah, that's fastest. Thanks. That was agile.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to ask maybe to Dave, what is, do you have connections with the Gov UK initiative? I've seen a talk from Mr. Mike Bracken yesterday, and I mean, their approach is very good because they don't talk about MOUs. They don't, I mean, do the things, show the thing, and start doing things and not plan too much. Are you also following?
The question there is, do you collaborate?
Yeah. Sorry, is that working? I can't hear.
Yeah,
okay,
it is
okay.
working,
Yeah, very much so. I mean, Britain is an incredibly centralised country. So many services that people in other parts of Europe take for granted of being at regional or département or sort of city level are national services. So Mike and his team tackled really the most difficult central government operation, I think, probably anywhere in Europe. Perhaps some of our French colleagues would disagree, but I think it's certainly one of the most difficult ones. And if you like, that's freed us up. So it's had to be done very differently at national government. You can't just copy that and transfer it to local government. But what it's sent is a message from the highest level that cities and local authorities, whether they're urban or rural, must innovate and must take innovation and must change the way they operate. And that's certainly been the case in Manchester. We changed the whole sort of web channel service, you know, mobile services and so on. So it's an inspiration rather than a direct link.
More questions there? Thanks, Ger, for going with
Hi. For Tim largely, but others too. When you use these open platforms, community-based platforms for things like crime mapping, and then the police take it on, how do you deal with the complicated issues to do with authority, power, and privacy in those kind of systems?
Privacy. Yeah, so far they've been relatively benign applications. I mean, the ability to see where crime statistics are in your neighborhood. We've already, you know, the data was already released. It was generalized to the address, 100 block level. I thought you were going to ask about what happens when there's a bug. Yeah, they get arrested. No, what happens when, well, it's an open source product. So the code is on GitHub. When there is a bug, you can report it on GitHub. Other people can come and fix it. The people who actually implemented it are savvy enough with the frameworks that they could fix it themselves. I don't know. I feel like maybe I didn't understand your question well enough. Okay. All right. Sure.
There was still questions in the back.
Yes. Do you know if there's in your project anything between open source and closed source, something that is more in the shared source, so that it would be only shared by cities and not private, for example, and not fully open to open source?
No. Okay.
Sorry.
I think I saw still few hands there. There.
Thank you. My name is Stig Jesbak from Aalborg University. I put on maybe my political cap. Eurocities, which is a nice organization with a lot of engagement. On the other side, I think for the future, there's a need for collaboration. So why not collaborate a little bit with sustainable cities, which is built upon the Aalborg commitment, and have a very strong partnership with the eClay, which is include all local governments in Europe. So I think it could be a fruitful collaboration. So please do something.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's starting. There is a formal link between Eurocities and the C40 group, and I think we'll build on that. And don't also forget that there's a collaboration with the European Network of Living Labs, many of which are directly linked into the sustainability issue. So you're absolutely correct.
Take one more quick question.
Yes, I saw a difference. You all talked about open source. You used open source, or you are very... all the projects, I saw also as CitySDK is an open source project. But I saw a difference between CitySDK projects and the cases of Manchester and Philadelphia. In Manchester and Philadelphia, they talk a lot about a community. They don't have a platform, but they have a lot of heterogeneous open source software. But they have the community to build this any application or any infrastructure. What about the community in a very nice project like CitySDK, actually to create an APIs? I think it's the future for local government. But have you planned to build a community? Because as I saw in GitHub, you don't have a lot of committers, or maybe I saw something else. But my view is that there is not a community. And how are you going to build one?
Yeah, it's obviously a great question. I mean, one of the ideas to work in an open source way, obviously, is that you work with the community. Otherwise, it's just a geek programming some software, basically, and it doesn't matter if it's open or closed, basically. So, yeah, so isn't it? I mean, so, yeah, sure, yeah, of course. But what we need to do and what we're doing, I mean, we are trying to stimulate communities, but as a city, building a community is quite different, actually, because it's policymakers who start a company with an organization, managing an organization with developers is not that logical. What we try to do is find the instruments to stimulate them to develop stuff based on the things we want to do. So we work with challenges, we work with accelerator programs, we work with all types of networks, European, FIWARE, etc. See how can we tap into the community that's already there, so they start to work on the stuff we've been doing. So, but we were not community managers. I mean, we are not very credible in terms of organizing something for developers. But what we can do is to stimulate it and make sure people get paid when they make great stuff.
And I think I've been working on that project for 3 years. I think I have a mic there. That it's really important to tap into the local developer communities. So they're actually the same. I mean, we don't create one separate one. It's really like you said, go tap to the existing challenges, existing communities and so forth. I think thank you for all the questions. I think we are now running out of time. I would like to thank all the inspiring examples from cities. I hope all the cities here take their advice and start sharing, reusing, and collaborating with other cities. And those who are interested in CitySDK, we have a brand new cookbook following, I guess. So we're in the same lines, liking food, I guess. So please pick a copy for yourself or get it from our website.
And can I get a big hand for Hannah organizing this, please?
Okay. Well, thank you for